Hi, Laurie. Welcome to 11 Questions.
Thank you, Damon. I'm excited to be here.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I am definitely a morning person, especially the older I get. So I love my mornings where I can get up. We usually get up actually when it's still dark outside, like 5:30 or 6, and have coffee. And that's when I do a lot of my social media. I'll reply to emails and check Facebook and that. And I love easing into my day. Especially after so many years of working where I had to get up and quickly, rush.
And what's a perfect weekend for you?
A perfect weekend would be weather in the 70s. I live in Michigan, so weather is a big deal here, as opposed to, are you in California?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we don't take nice days for granted. So a nice, perfect day, a perfect weekend would be going for a nice walk, going over to Lake Michigan, where we have a sailboat, and maybe taking our dog and going on a nice sail and having drinks afterwards, watching the sunset over Lake Michigan, and going to a nice dinner. And yeah, something like listening to live music. We love live music. So
That
and
sounds
having
really
friends
nice.
around, family around, always fun.
What's your favorite place in the world to be at?
Oh my gosh. I used to say Paris was my favorite place. I absolutely love Paris, but my most recent book is set in Italy. And when I went to Italy, I really fell in love with it. And right now, that's the place that calls to me. That's the place I want to go back to. I loved everything about it. I loved the food and the people and the local wine and the architecture and just the feeling of, the old mixing with the new. Yeah, I would have to say Italy.
Did you always want to be a writer?
I've always loved writing. I remember, in elementary and junior high and high school, just that was my favorite thing when we would be assigned a writing task, not necessarily a term paper, but like a creative writing task. But my family was very working class. And so I was the first one in my family to go off to college. And my mom said, well, would you, do you want to be a teacher or a nurse? That was like, those were kind of the choices, although of course I could have done anything. And I ended up becoming a speech pathologist, but writing was never, ever something that I thought would happen to me as to be a professional writer, especially an author. So that wasn't until I was about 40 years old that I started writing and taking writing classes and really getting into it.
Do you follow a routine?
Not like I should. I like to start writing right after lunch, write for a couple hours, actually write even a couple hours before lunch, break, write a couple more. When I'm really into something, that's what I do. And I do try to stick to a routine, which is hard because especially after I retired from my day job, my friends would say, hey, do you want to go to lunch? And I'm thinking, sure, that's really fun. I was never able to do that. So it took me a while to learn to be disciplined and to say no. It's a little uncomfortable because I'm a people pleaser, but I have to treat it like a job. That's what I try to do.
And when you work, do you work in like a messy space or are you an organized person?
I work right here. We're actually sitting at my desk. I've got a big you're on my laptop. I've got a desktop over here. There's a lot of windows. There's windows all around here that look out on this little fountain. It's kind of peaceful. This is in the lower level of my house. A lot of times I'll take this little laptop and go upstairs and write just in the kitchen at the kitchen counter. I always light a candle and try to get myself into that space.
Is there something that you find challenging about writing process?
When I first started writing, I thought, well, my mom will read this or my sister. And when it actually got published, it's very intimidating to think, oh my gosh, people really want to read something that I've written. And And then even more intimidating, trying to write the next one, because then there are people who liked the book and might pick up the second book. And I want to please my agent. I want to please my editor and the sales team and all my readers. And
What inspires your writing?
I've always been a daydreamer. And when I see anything, a couple on the street with baby, I kind of provide a story for them. Like, oh, I bet they are newlyweds and they've got this new baby and they're feeling overwhelmed, whatever. I kind of like have little stories, have always been sort of a storyteller, I guess. And so it's really wonderful when an idea really strikes that I think, now there's a good story. That's fabulous when that happens. But not every good idea leads to a full-length book, I've learned. So I've got a lot of partially finished things that like, oh, I thought it was a great idea for a book, but it just doesn't hold enough heft to go the whole 300 pages or whatnot.
And when you hit like a writer's block, how do you work around it?
So for the second book, I had a deadline and I had signed the contract before the book was written, which I don't do anymore because it really sort of messed with my mind. I felt so much pressure and I had breast cancer during that time. I remember thinking, I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to write. My agent was fabulous and she was just like, take your time. And I guess I just plowed through in that case. But like right now, I've been kind of stuck on my next book. I've had a couple of false starts and I've allowed myself to just, okay, take a break, take a few weeks off or whatever it takes until I don't want to just throw a book out there to have my next book. I want it to be something that people really enjoy. So I'm just trying to develop that instead of forcing it.
If you were to be deserted on an island with only 3 books, which ones would you take with you?
Oh my gosh. Damon, this is hard. 3 books. I know I'm supposed to say the Bible. I actually have not read the Bible like I should, so maybe I'll take the Bible along. I love John Steinbeck's books. I loved East of Eden. I thought that was a fabulous book. I loved The Kite Runner. That was just an amazing book. I love everything by Maeve Binchy, just for her light, fun reading.
If you were to pick one interesting life experience to share, what would you tell today?
I wrote a women's fiction in first person, and my mom really loved it, and she shared it with her friends, and they loved it. So I was submitting it to agents, and I had an agent in New York, Dan Lazar, his name was, with Writers House, who asked for the full manuscript. And I was so excited because I just thought Dan Lazar was going to be my dream agent. Eventually, one day I was getting ready for work and I see that he replied. He wrote, I think you are a talent, but your book is just not right for me. It doesn't have enough twists and turns that I like in a novel. And I was crushed, but I was also buoyed by the fact that he thought it had, he even gave me the name of another agent to query that he thought might like it. So I gave myself an assignment, said, I am going to write a book that has twists and turns, and when it wants to zag, I'm going to make it zig. I'm just going to, and it's going to be an exercise, like a homework assignment just for me. I'll put that book away. And then the one after that is the one that I'll get published. So for the next year, I wrote this novel that every time it was going here, I would purposely make it shift and all these plot shifts just to give myself that exercise of doing what Dan Lazar wanted, a book that was unpredictable. So I finished that, put it away. Shortly after that, I found the old life list that I had written when I was about 12 years old. And it made me think of, what would happen if I had to complete all of these items on my life list, started writing a book, and it just came so effortlessly. And I was so excited. I had a rough draft done in about 3 months. So of course, I wanted to query Dan Lazar and let him know that I had a book for him and we were going to sell this book and he was going to be my dream agent. So I write him a query letter reminding him that he had read something else of mine and that I think this one has more twists and turns that he was looking for. The very next day in my inbox, I see the reply and I am so thrilled. I'm like, I remember thinking, my life is about to change. Dan Lazar is going to look at this book and he's going to sell my manuscript. So I open the email and it says, "Dear author, thank you for your interest in Writer's House. Unfortunately, your work, your project is not for us. Best wishes." And it's signed his assistant.
Oh no.
I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. I called my husband. I was sobbing. He came home and I was like, I just felt like Dan Lazar. I was hanging all of my hope on this agent for some reason. So I'm thinking, if he doesn't like it, nobody will. A few days later, I pick myself up and I think, this little assistant of Dan Lazar's is standing in my way. He's the one rejecting it. So I changed the wording of the query letter, because they get hundreds a day. Send it off again. The very next day, the exact same reply. And now I'm ticked. I'm thinking, this pesky little assistant is ruining my life. And Dan Lazar is going to be very upset if he finds out that he's rejecting my manuscript. So I sent a query letter, snail mail, personal and confidential, Daniel Lazar. And about 2 weeks later, I get the reply in my self-addressed envelope from Dan Lazar saying, "No, thank you." So then I had to take a deep breath. And I spent the next year really polishing that novel. He had not read it, but he had read the query letter, and it was probably premature because I was so excited and so sure that he was going to want to read it. So I spent a good portion of that year really polishing the manuscript. I sent it off to a freelance editor named Aaron Brown, who had great suggestions, and I ended up requerying far and wide, not to Daniel Lazar though. I gave up on him after 3, but after about 4 months of querying, I had 3 offers of representation. And so I was thrilled, and I'm just so happy that I ended up with Jenny Bent as my agent. So that's a long-winded answer to tell you about a life experience, but I think it shows new writers a few things: perseverance, and how to, you've got to have a thick skin in this business. And sometimes, it sounds so cliche, when one door closes, another opens. Jenny has been fabulous. I'm sure Dan is fabulous too, but I could not be happier.